Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jiyoon Song, and I'm an organizer at an immigrants and racial justice organization, Hana Center in Chicago. Today, I'm very excited to be facilitating as the MC for this webinar titled The 2020 U.S. Presidential Election and the Outlook of the Korean Peninsula. Our guest speaker is Professor Han-sik Park, a professor of international affairs at the University of Georgia and a renowned expert of North Korea. This webinar is organized by a respected group, the National Unification Advisory Council Chicago Chapter, shortened for NUAC, and the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in Chicago. The National Unification Advisory Council is a constitutional organization established in accordance with Article 92 of the Constitution of the Republic of Korea and the National Unification Advisory Council Act to advise the South Korean president on the formulation of a peaceful unification policy. NUAC advises and makes proposals regarding policy development and implementation for democratic and peaceful inter-Korean unification. With only about a week left of the 2020 election, this is such a crucial time for all of us to stay engaged. As we are a diasporic community, Korean unification is one of the topics that are very important to many of us. So I invite us all to stay tuned and engaged with our guest speaker. After the Professor Park's lecture, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So please make note of any questions you may have throughout the lecture directly on YouTube chat. There will also be a link for a brief survey about today's experience below at the description box, as well as the YouTube chat box, and we encourage you to please participate. Now I invite Kyungnan Yu, President of NUAC's Chicago chapter, to give us a welcoming speech.
Good evening. I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. My name is Kyungnan Yu, the president of the National Unification Advisory Council Chicago chapter. As you are aware, the 2020 U.S. presidential election is 1 week away. As we witnessed in the past few years, although there has been multiple efforts by the South Korean President Moon Jae-in, hopeful meetings between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un, we are still short of signing the peace treaty to end the Korean War. Because the fate of this peace treaty heavily relies on the U.S. policy to end the war on the Korean Peninsula, we believe as Korean Americans and concerned Americans, we feel we must participate in this process. Tonight, we are extremely honored and excited and fortunate to have Professor Park, who will speak on the subject of U.S. presidential election and the outlook of Korean Peninsula. Once again, our deepest thanks to renowned expert Professor Park in giving us much better insight in this situation. The NUAC also like to thank the Korean Consulate General in Chicago to make this event possible to reach our community. We wish all of you to stay safe and healthy during the pandemic, and forever thanks to the essential workers. 고맙습니다.
Thank you, President Yu. As she mentioned, I want to reiterate the importance of voting. So I encourage all of us to be empowered to exercise your right to vote. We only have a week left. Now I want to introduce Seung-Hwan Lee, the Secretary General of NUAC, who will give us another greeting.
시카고 협의회 자문위원 및 동포 여러분, 그리고 미국 시민 여러분 반갑습니다. 저는 민주평화통일 자문회의 사무처장 이승만입니다. 어려운 상황임에도 불구하고 한반도 평화 통일을 위한 공감대 확산을 위해서 좋은 강연을 준비해 주신 시카고 협의회에 감사드립니다. 무엇보다 이번 행사에 참여하기 위해 온라인, 오프라인 등 다양한 방식으로 참여하고 계신 여러분들께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 2019년 9월 1일 출범한 19기 시카고 협의회는 유경란 협의회장님을 중심으로 어려운 코로나 환경 속에서도 다양한 사업을 추진해서 미주 지역협의회의 모범이 되고 있습니다. 특별히 이번 행사는 평화공동 외교를 위한 민주평통과 외교부의 첫 협력 사례로서 그 의미가 매우 크다고 하겠습니다. 행사 개최를 위해 물심양면으로 지원을 아끼지 않은 시카고 총영사관에 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 진행하는 강연에서 박한식 교수님께서는 얼마 남지 않은 2020년 미국 대선과 이에 따른 한미 간 관계에 대해서 설명해 주실 예정입니다. 미 대선 이후의 한미 관계와 포스트 코로나 시대 한반도 평화 프로세스를 준비하기 위한 매우 시의적절한 강연이라고 생각합니다. 아무쪼록 이번 강연을 통해 자문위원 및 동포 여러분들이 현재 위기를 극복하고 다가올 미래에 선제적으로 대처할 수 있는 지혜를 얻으시기를 기원합니다. 모두 아시다시피 현재 세계는 코로나 바이러스와 힘겨운 싸움을 계속하고 있습니다. 그러나 세계 각국에서 보여주고 있는 위기 극복과 보건 협력 노력은 인류가 더 나은 미래로 나아갈 수 있는 큰 희망이 되고 있습니다. 시카고 협의회도 이번 코로나19 확산을 방지하기 위해 국내 대한적십자사에 약 900만 원과 그리고 시카고 동포사회에 1200불을 지원하였고 사랑의 마스크 4300장과 손세정제 250개를 지원하였다고 들었습니다. 시카고 지역사회 상생을 위해 헌신과 노고를 아끼지 않으신 자문위원 여러분들께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 민주평화통일자문회의 의장이신 문재인 대통령께서는 최근 유엔 연설을 통해 한반도의 평화는 동북아의 평화를 보장하고 나아가 세계 질서의 변화에 긍정적으로 작용할 것이며 그 시작은 한반도 종전선언에 있다고 강조하신 바 있습니다. 또한 정부는 동북아의 평화를 구축하기 위해 2032 서울-평양 공동올림픽 개최 유치를 위해 노력하고 있습니다. 세계인들이 올림픽을 통해 서울과 평양을 동시에 방문하고 즐기는 진정한 평화를 이루기 위한 것입니다. 동포 여러분과 미국 시민 여러분께서도 한반도가 70년의 전쟁을 끝내고 화해와 변형의 시대로 전진해 나갈 수 있도록 힘을 모아 주시기 바랍니다. 아무쪼록 이번 온라인 강연 및 토론회가 힘든 시기를 함께 이겨내고 있는 여러분들께 더 큰 위로와 용기가 되기를 기원합니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you, Secretary General Seung-Hwan Lee. We appreciate the recognition and acknowledgement of producing this event during the COVID-19 times, as I've seen many of the council members work hard to make this event possible online. Now we'll watch a recorded video from Dr. Young-Suk Kim, Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in Chicago.
안녕하십니까. 주 시카고 총영사 김영석입니다. 오늘 미국 대통령 선거와 남북관계, 미국의 대북 정책 전망에 대한 웨비나가 열리게 된 것을 축하합니다. 오늘 이 뜻깊은 웨비나를 준비해 주신 민주평화통일자문회의 시카고 협의회 유경란 회장님과 위원님 여러분께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 아울러 본 행사 기획 단계부터 많은 노력을 기울여 주신 민주평통 사무처 관계자 여러분께도 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 올해는 한국 전쟁이 일어난 지 70주년이 되는 해입니다. 한국 전쟁을 통해 형성된 한미 동맹은 지난 70년 동안 단순한 군사 동맹을 넘어 경제, 문화, 보건 분야 등 다양한 분야의 협력으로 확대되어 양국의 발전에 큰 기여를 해왔습니다. 또한 2018년과 19년 두 차례에 걸친 북미 정상회담 개최와 남북미 정상 간 판문점 회동 등 남북관계 개선과 한반도에서의 긴장 완화, 항구적 평화체제 구축을 위해서도 한미 양국은 지속적으로 협력하고 긴밀한 공조를 유지해오고 있습니다. 이러한 한미 관계를 고려할 때 미국 대통령 선거를 일주일여 앞둔 시점에서 열리는 이번 웨비나는 미국 대선 이후의 남북 관계 등에 대한 향후 전망을 해본다는 점에서 매우 시의적절하고 중요한 의미를 가지고 있습니다. 오늘 웨비나가 미국 대통령 선거를 바라보는 우리의 시각을 넓혀주는 계기가 되기를 기대하며 좋은 강연을 해주실 박한식 교수님께도 감사드립니다. 다시 한번 유경란 회장님과 관계자 여러분들께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드리며 참여하신 모든 분들의 건강을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dr. Young-Suk Kim. It is so important for us to remember that this year marks the 70th year since the Korean War. Now, I'm very happy to introduce Professor Han-sik Park. He was born in the Republic of China to ethnically Korean parents. He attended Seoul National University for his undergrad, the American University for his master's, and finally, the University of Minnesota's for PhD. He's both the professor emeritus and the director of the Center for the Study of Global Issues at the University of Georgia. He has acted as an unofficial negotiator between the United States and North Korea and has visited North Korea more than 50 times. Notably, he escorted Presidents Jimmy Carter and President Bill Clinton to North Korea numerous times. In addition, he has received the Gandhi King Ikeda Community Builders Prize in 2010. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Han Park.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? All right, I assume you can hear me. The topic given to me for tonight is very, very difficult one because we don't know which way the election football will bounce. We really don't know who will be elected. In fact, the outcome of one or the other candidate being elected has profound implications and impact on the Korean Peninsula, especially US-North Korea relations. So no one knows who will be elected. And in fact, no one knows the two candidates proposed policy strategies with respect to North Korea or the Korean Peninsula. We don't know. No one knows. But based on past experience, 4.5 years plus, the president or the man, Donald Trump, has shown enough tendencies in terms of policy options and policy preferences that we can gauge his direction roughly. And on the other hand, Joe Biden's position on Korea is very unknown. But fortunately, the other night, when the two candidates had a television public debate, I listened very carefully twice, and I noticed a couple of sentences, very profound sentences that Joe Biden expressed in his presentation. So based on that, I'm going to make some observations tonight. But before doing anything, I'd like to establish the context in which tonight's topic becomes relevant and important. The context is that Korea is in deep state of crisis. We've got to know that. What kind of crisis we have to know? Where does the crisis come from? We have to know. Is there anything we can do something about? Some problems associated with the problem. We have to know the background, historical background is very important. Today, North and South Korea might be the most Korean peninsula is militarily fortified spot in the entire world. Plus you have 28,000 American troops combined with some 600,000 South Korean troops. And there you have the other side of the border, probably if you include all reserve and civilian military types of people, perhaps close to 1 million people, North Koreans are fully armed and prepared to get involved in military confrontation. Furthermore, North Korea has recently become a nuclear power. Like it or not, North Korea is a nuclear country, has tested 5-6 times successfully the nuclear bomb, and any number of long-range and middle and short-range missiles they tested successfully. So empirically, North Korea is already a nuclear power, the capability of making more. So now you have, where does this militarization come from? And now South Korea, on the other hand, as we all know, is extremely developed capitalist system. Despite all kinds of political uncertainties and problems, the South Korean government has become a very liberal democratic system, and combined with the capitalism, very effective, successful capitalism. Furthermore, recently, as a Korean living in the United States for a long, long time, I'm so proud of being Korean based on the record of South Korea's handling the pandemic, for example. So we have a lot to talk about those things. That's a separate issue, however. Now, Korea's inter-Korea relationship begins with Japanese occupation of Korea. Japan occupied Korea for 36 years, 1910 to 1945. During that period, South-North Koreans, there was no division, but their human rights are extremely, completely exploited by the occupant of the peninsula, that is Korea. And fortunately, Japan actually surrendered at the hand of a couple of atomic bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. As a result, Japan became very almost subservient to the United States, the country that destroyed with atomic bombs Japan itself. So here, as soon as Japan surrendered, instead of Korean government being established, what happened was the winners, major winners of the Second World War, the Soviet Union and the United States, they had their international political ambition and their plans to expand their influence. So that was the beginning of Cold War in 1945-48. Cold War means division of Korea was never unified. So Cold War is a war in which two parties, that is Soviet Union and United States, accumulated weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear bombs. The United States in 1945 tested the nuclear bombs in real war in Japan, and the Soviet Union developed its own became a nuclear power 1954. So here you have two world powers becoming nuclear powers. And throughout the Cold War decades, they have competed to create more weapons, accumulate more weapons, and influence their subsidiary governments and countries with militarization. So they sold their arms, they taught their subsidiary governments to develop their own and produce their own weapons. So Cold War was a period of weaponization of the world. Think about the number of atomic bombs the United States created was close to if not over, 10,000 nuclear warheads. The Soviet Union not that far behind. Today, we don't know how many thousand nuclear bombs are in different corners of the world. Very, very scary situation. Now, the world is paying attention to North Korean nuclearization. One small country, starving country, tried to defend itself and created the ability to manufacture weapons and devices to carry the weapons by one country, one poor country. You think about how massively it is distorted. North Korea is not really a country expected to become nuclear power, but it has. Why? Because North Korea could not survive without defending the country. If North Korea hadn't developed the nuclear bombs, North Korea would have become like Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Libya's Gaddafi. So North Koreans' determination to become a nuclear power helped North Korea to maintain its existence. That we have to empirically accept, and we have to realize why North Korea has developed the nuclear bombs and reluctant to relinquish the bombs. So that's the nuclearization background. On the other hand, South Korea did not have any comparable weaponization program comparable to North Korea. On the other hand, South Korea, however, developed a military security dependence on the United States, complete dependence. Today, as we speak, South Korea doesn't have the authority to have wartime military decisions, military strategic decisions. So South Korea cannot move its own armies, its own military. In a way, South Korea is not a sovereign state. It has no ability to use its authority for the military maneuvering. That is unheard of as a sovereign state. But the United States is taking good care of South Korea's security. So it's much more complicated, but that's the situation, inter-Korea relations. The two, throughout the Cold War, not only did they arm themselves, in the case of South Korea, relying on the United States assistance military, but in the case of North Korea and South Korea, they mutually demonized. South Koreans believe that communists are devil and ill-equipped to reside together in a civilized world. North Korean thinks likewise about South Korea. So the two systems have intense hatred, if you will, disapproval, if you will, but at the same time, they have military capability in the North, nuclear capability even. So unless we manage it very skillfully, the relationships, any kind of military provocation, military clash will mean disaster, not only for Koreans, but the region and the global community as a whole. If you have a war in Korea, most likely there will be a third world war involving China and the United States. So that importance, that kind of grave importance is for us. So in this situation, if you look at Donald Trump and Joe Biden's position statements, I can, based on general analysis and my experience or our common experience with the two candidates, we can summarize as follows. Donald Trump is basically a racist. Donald Trump has a strong white supremacy ideology. And he dropped not the United States as a whole. It's a strong racist tenet there. And I'm an American scholar, but it's very sad to admit that the United States is quite racist, quite white supremacist. Because of that, Donald Trump will not protect the dignity of North Korea. He may like Kim Jong-un, one person, but I don't think he likes Korean people, North or South Korea. So Donald Trump, if necessary, will be using military tactics against North Korea. And that means North Korea realizing that had already become a nuclear power. So any kind of military confrontation between the United States and North Korea would mean disaster, calamity for all Koreans, for the region as well as the world. So here, Donald Trump's position is, if he likes North Korea, why he hasn't reduced the sanctions against North Korea. He could have reduced in Hanoi, in Saigon, in Singapore, he would have reduced, but he did not. He's not going to help economically North Korea. What he likes is very interesting character, Kim Jong-un. He would like to take pictures together. He may be thinking it would have helped the election chances, but that's all over. Now, from now on the part of Donald Trump, there will be no desire to improve relations with North Korea. And in fact, Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump's Secretary of State, a few days ago, he reiterated once again that North Korea must denuclearize completely as a condition for negotiation, for peace treaty, for non-aggression treaty, for peace arrangement, any kind of peace arrangement. And in other words, Mike Pompeo suggested that we will not talk with North Korea unless North Korea has already denuclearized. That means, as an expert, I can say, the United States Trump government doesn't want to deal with the denuclearization issue because there's no scientific way of verifying North Korea's denuclearization, complete denuclearization. The IAEA has a special inspection mechanism that is the outside people, in this case IAEA, must indicate we want to go in there, look at that, and that's so specific locations we'll have to demand. But the problem is the world doesn't know where to look at unless you go and search the entire land. There's no way that we can even have a special inspection by the International Atomic Agency. So it's impossible. So non-implementable policy that is complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, that is unimplementable. As long as that is US policy, we can say that US doesn't want North Korea denuclearized. In a way, North Korea doesn't want denuclearization of North Korea. Why? Then it cannot sell enormous amount of weapons to South Korea, possibly to Japan, possibly to Taiwan. So what moves America is a military-industrial complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower predicted. America is now pretty much arrested by the forces of military-industrial complex. Because of that, the Trump, if he gets reelected, we will not see any improvement for either denuclearization or for negotiation. Diplomatic solution is not in the card of Donald Trump. Now, what do I think about Joe Biden? Joe Biden is, when he was a senator for 36 years, most of the time he was a member and usually chairman or ranking member of the other party of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And I met several times with him during that period of time. He's a very rational person. He likes American democracy, no question about it. He doesn't like socialism, I can say, but he is a very reasonable person. He is a person who can empathize the different situation. I think he can empathize North Korea better than Trump or anyone else that I know. He can empathize, he can put himself in different cultural, political, ideological shoes. You know, so much so that think about his running mate, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris represents ultimate version of diversity in the world. Her mother is an Indian with different religion, not Christian. Her father was Jamaican, not really American Indian, whose ancestors shipped from Africa as slaves, not that kind of American. But her husband is Jewish. Think about her climate is very diverse. Knowing that, appreciating that, Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris. I think that is an important indication of Joe Biden's inclinations toward the world, more diversity oriented. And I think based on my personal experience, I can say that he will understand North Korean system as it is. Instead of putting communist jacket or different kind of jackets. So if that's the case, at least in the speech, however, in the debate, he said two things very quickly. In at least in one sentence, he put two things. If you listen very carefully, please go and listen again. Two things he said. One, in order for me to meet with Kim Jong-un and have a dialogue with him, I don't require complete denuclearization. I require drawing down of nuclear capability. Those are the words. So North Korea, as long as draws down nuclear capability, then I will speak with him. We will have a negotiation. Meaning, he already approved or accepted the reality that North Korea is a nuclear power. Even if you take out all the weapons and all the manufacturing facilities like Yongbyon place and everything, still you have the scientists, you have the science, you have technological know-how because they have done once or more. So they can become, they have weapons, uranium, even a lot of material. So they have everything they can turn around, make a nuclear bomb from scratch within 3-4 months. North Korea, in other words, is a nuclear power, has become a nuclear power. If the United States wanted to denuclearize waited too long. You see, when Barack Obama was the president, I expected him to be more active in making peace with North Korea, but he did not. Why? He thought North Korea will not survive, like East Germany will not survive. So if you let North Korea, have trade embargoes and all that, economic difficulty will bring the system down. That's what Obama thought. Obama is not very smart international student of international politics, whereas Joe Biden is. So Joe Biden didn't approve what Obama was doing. What he was doing is none other than strategic patience. Wait, in Korean, 전략적 인내. The strategic patience idea came from the United States, from Washington. Actually, Obama had the strategic patience and communicated that idea to South Koreans through Hillary Clinton around 2009 or 10. So strategic patience is you wait, and just like East Germany, North Korea will collapse. That never happened. I can tell you, I visited North Korea some 50 times, written a lot about North Korea. I know a little bit about North Korea. North Korea will not collapse. I can assure you, will not collapse. If you have any doubt, go and watch that 75th anniversary parade had a few days ago, the anniversary of the creation of the People's Korea Labor Party, the Communist Party of Korea. So that country is not unstable. The regime is not experiencing any crisis. The people support 100%. People support, then the system have legitimacy. When a country that does not have legitimacy, it goes into regime crisis. It may collapse in time. But it has economic difficulties. No country that I know of has collapsed because of economic difficulty alone. North Korea will not. No, in mid-1990s, I visited a couple of times each year. They had extreme difficult food situation, but they did not survive. With the economic difficulty, still they had political legitimacy, people's support. We have to know that. So here, the Joe Biden's approach is much more realistic because did not demand the complete denuclearization. And also Joe Biden said one important phrase, that one, we want nuclear-free zone in that area, meaning both North and South Korea should be nuclear-free. If not more than that, maybe in the future Japan, Taiwan may be included. But nuclear-free zone concept is very compatible with Kim Il-sung's idea of denuclearization. Both North and South Korea. North Korea will not even listen to any kind of negotiation if the topic is North Korea's denuclearization. North Korea doesn't think that is acceptable. It has to be the regional, the Korean peninsula as a whole, both North and South, should be denuclearized. South Korea doesn't have its own nuclear capability, but American vessels and troops and their tactical nuclear warheads, any number of those we have had. So all these must be removed, and we must remove those. And Biden suggested that. No one else done that. So I have a somewhat blind, hopeful thinking that the Biden administration will be much more constructive for Korean situation. But we have to have a Biden elected first. In any case, so a few days election. Now go back to the Korean situation. The Korean situation is very, very, as I said, unpredictable. But now this extremely different kind of North Korea, South Korea. How do we find a way of reuniting? If you are going to have one system prevailing over the other, there's no unification scenario. Korea is no Germany. North Korea is no East Germany. South Korea is no West Germany. You have entirely political climate, economic arrangements there and everything, and culture, everything is different. East Germany has been under the direct influence of the Soviet Union. It has never developed its own ideology, but North Korea is different. North Korea, what kind of socialism is North Korea? First, we have to realize that North Korea is a socialist system. Socialism meaning there is no private ownership in terms of real estate and so on. It's different from South Korea. North Korea is an extremely nationalistic system, whereas South Korea is different, not as nationalistic. South Korea is more pragmatist and perhaps a global. But North Korea is very nationalist system. So North Korea is different from the South in that North Korea is trying to establish a society totally equal. Equality is more important than liberty. As we know, socialism's emphasis is on equality as opposed to capitalism, which is based on freedom or liberty. But North and South Korea, one is equality, one is liberty. South Korea seems to be oftentimes too liberal to the extent that when you have money, there's no way that you can curb that. So polarization of distribution of resources, that's South Korea. No such thing as polarization, rich people, poor people in North Korea. So in other words, what I'm saying is we have different systems. We cannot find unification. The only way of finding unification is doing peaceful unification. You know, Koreans have been arrested by what I call the security paradigm. Security, everything is security oriented. But what we need is not security. Security, we believe, can be brought about by militarization, strong army, strong economy. Then you have money, you have soldiers, guns, then you have secure. That's security, but that's not peace, because peace is not the absence of conflict. The absence of conflict is absence of conflict. It's not peace. What is peace? Peace is the creation of harmony. That's a peace. Harmony is the creation of oneness out of diversity. If you're going to musical harmony, you have different instruments in orchestra played. The conductor will find a way to harmonize them. That harmony is a creation of oneness at the higher level out of diversity in the lower level. That's what harmony is. So we have to work at creation of harmony. How do we do that? We harmonize North Korea and South Korea. There is equality and liberty. We can harmonize. Why not? Individuals and collective entities, why not? We can harmonize. We cannot think of individuals apart from groups, and vice versa. It's theoretically possible, empirically, historically, reliable solution. That is a peaceful solution, not security solution. Security solution, everyone will die because our military capability is such that we decided to use the military security instruments, then we are all doomed. That we have to realize, especially young people living in the United States with Korean ancestry. You've got to realize that we have to work for peace, not security. Because, human history, we have had this security paradigm for 2,000 plus years. Now, security doesn't give us even security itself. It's always unstable, always provocation, always fear, distrust, mistrust. That's what security culture will provide rather than peaceful environment. So here, the world needs peaceful development, not security anymore, the world. Now we talk about China's coming out as a superpower and the United States staying as a superpower and making a new kind of world order, the polarized world order, instead of Soviet Union and the United States, now China versus the United States. I don't think it will ever work because the two systems are not fully enough to commit suicide, both of them. It's different. The Soviet and American situation, yes, they had a mutual fear. They developed a competitive instinct to accumulate more weapons. But this is going to be different. But we cannot live together in the world without some principal order, the mechanism of order. That's a peace paradigm. Peace requires diversity. If you have a diversity, we have to understand each other. If you are a member of orchestra, I played orchestra. What do? You always listen to others, other instruments. You always listen to the conductor's instructions. So, if you play in an orchestra, you cannot hear others very well. You only hear yourself very clearly. But you've got to make an effort to listen to others, try make yourselves a part of that big system, orchestra, harmonic music. So likewise, in order to approach effectively to peaceful unification, we've got to have dialogue, understanding, communication, and coming and going that is needed. Moon Jae-in, the April 27th agreement at Panmunjom was a great agreement. Roh Moo-hyun's October 4th agreement, very specific and great agreement. Most of all, Kim Dae-jung's June 15 agreement was historic, so heroic agreement. Would have been very difficult. But now Koreans, North and South Korea together did it that no one has ever done in the world. So young people, if you're young people, listen to me, think. You find a source of pride for being a Korean based on our ability to make peace rather than economic achievement, military achievement. That's not where true pride, true superiority of Korean people lies. So you've got to understand how important it is, how necessary it is to find a path toward peace, not security, for the world. If we don't have that kind of world, the world will not be able to be sustained, unless really cooperation and so on. Even this pandemic, coronavirus, the world is almost about to collapse. Western civilization is experiencing great deal of turmoil because its inability to handle such a thing, very simple thing. And still, America is saying this is a China virus. What kind of China virus is that? The virus is the nature, the mother nature's angry at human beings because humans have exploited the nature. So the nature cannot anymore maintain its equilibrium system anymore. The ecological balance is destroyed. Who did that? Human beings did that. So the nature is barking back, striking back against humanity. That's where this virus happened. So we have to find a way of working together to rehabilitate the quality of the globe, the world, so that further, if human beings and nature fight, who will win? You look at tornadoes, you get earthquake, anything. We are not that strong, We can kill ourselves. We can develop nuclear bombs in order to kill ourselves, each other, but we don't have the ability to even control the weather. The global ecological system is falling with a peaceful paradigm, a paradigm of peace that is created by the Korean people and experimented in Korean reunification. And the world learning from Korean experience. Our young people equip themselves ideologically, theoretically, philosophically, go out to the world and show how great we are. I have been in the United States teaching for 50 years and studying for almost 60 years. I have studied here, but America is great in a number of areas, but America is blindfolded in a number of important areas that can be corrected, rectified by Korean people. That's what I think. If it is about time, I can finish here, and I'll be prepared to respond to any questions now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Park. That was amazing. So if you have not been able to post your questions, it's still not too late. We're still monitoring the YouTube chat, so please get your question in. But we'll start with some prepared questions that we have for you, Professor Park. So as for the first question, so we've kind of talked about this in the beginning, but we're still officially in a ceasefire for about last 70 years and not even closer to the official agreement between the two, South and North Korea. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the ceasefire is a temporary stoppage of war, exchange of bullets. Let's stop a little bit, It's just taking over time, weekend break. It's no peace. It's much too long. The break has been some 70-some years. It's unjustifiable, unrealistic, immoral. In the meantime, North and South Koreans spend too much it's too costly in terms of material and human costs. So it's way over the concluding the Korean War. It's silly. We shouldn't do that. We should work directly at peacemaking. If in fact the United States coming election, if they somehow Democratic Party regained the control of the Senate, which is distinct possibility in my reading, then Korean peace treaty is a possibility. Peace treaty requires Senate approval. So not only the President, the Senate must approve. Current Senate right now, Republican Senate, there's no way. But if Biden gets elected, Republican Senate, then there's a distinct possibility for peace treaty between North Korea, South Korea, United States, and China. We can do that. So so that has to be. Let's not even talk about the termination of the war. It's only a paper, but treaty participated in by multiple governments, countries, certainly to include the People's Republic of China. Oh, sorry. People's Republic of China and Russia and Europe. So these governments, these entities should get involved in and collective kind of peace arrangement. Then North Korea will give up all nuclear bombs and nuclear capabilities, minus their potential to develop from scratch. Once again, they will do. North Korea has crossed the river bridge, no return.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you know, South Korea, however, I don't know why South Korea is insistent on North Korean denuclearization. What does North Korea denuclearization do South Korea? Nothing. North Korean nuclear bombs will never be dropped in South Korea. They did not make the bombs for that. So I think it's time for South Korea to sit down very carefully and think of history, especially if Joe Biden is elected, US Senate is now changed. Then South Korea has a lot of homework to do. I know there are brilliant people working for the government for policy, and I hope and I wish they devote their talent and time and efforts to this issue.
Thank you. I think that gives us hope depending on the results of the election. So for our next question, we have, so you talked a little bit about the difference between security paradigm and striving for peace. However, we've seen that many people believe that increasing military power will increase both security and bring peace. Do you feel that some people, like, why do you think that some people coincide security and peace together? Do you think this is a result of the military industrial complex that you've talked about? And like, what type of relationship do you see?
Good question. If you have a peace, you don't need the security. If you have a security, you don't have a peace yet. So let's approach toward the peacemaking. That is interaction, that is compassion, that is communication, empathy. it's a peaceful relationship at all levels of society and government, then security will not be necessary. People will not fight. But if some people fight, security is fine. You can have security too, security and peace. But the two are entirely different. Peace includes security, but not the other way around. Okay, that's one. Uh, about the military-industrial complex, that is a very unfortunate development. Uh, Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his farewell speech, he introduced the term military-industrial complex in 1961. That was quite old concept. But uh, when weapons are made, you've got to use the weapons. Weapons, who is making weapons? Governments. With what money? Tax money. Private monies are never used for arms production, arms sales. So you have a public money. Public money is most foolishly used. No one wants to protect tax money, you know? So the military-industrial complex will expand. Why? Governments will purchase. When governments spend the tax money, they don't count the money. They just give the money and bring more money. So in American military spending, for example, today's military spending is so large. In fact, in my view, the American defense expenditure is more than all other countries combined, including China. So this is a crazy. America's military spending is crazy. In the process, a lot of rich people and the political, economic, moral corruptions. That's what we see. South Korea emulated, copied American military-industrial complex. South Korea has a lot of corruption in dealing with the weapons, purchasing weapons from the United States, and so forth. So military-industrial complex is morally wrong, politically corruptible always. So we should not, by people's opinion, we should eliminate military-industrial combination.
Thank you so much for that. In relation to that, we had a question from the audience. David King said, is there any example in human history that peace paradigm ever worked during the time of conflict between nations?
Yeah, if you look at Plato's book, Republic, Plato, that's a long time ago. They had a peaceful society, peaceful community. They had, say, the rulers, the central power is with the philosopher. That's called philosopher king. If you are ignorant, you cannot be a king. You have to be philosopher, meaning very wise, very knowledgeable person. So knowledge, wisdom will rule the community and in a peaceful way. Yes, that in Greek times, during the Socrates, Plato period, yes, we did have. It's about time for us to look back and do a little history study and reconstruct in today's context.
Thank you so much for that. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. So we've talked a lot about, and I think your lecture, you really point us at being proud of Korea, not for striving for economic prosperity or military power, but really striving for peace and harmony. Yeah. And as someone who identifies as a 1.5 generation living in America, as a Korean, what would be our role in that process? Like as a newer generation, how can we strive for peace and harmony as you've described?
Yeah, basically, we like to see North and South Korea, the differences, diversities, harmonized. Socialism and capitalism harmonized. Individualism, collectivism harmonized. Private emphasis and public emphasis harmonized. These can be done through what I call dialectical synthesis, dialectical logic. Hegel had it, Plato had it, dialectical logic. And also in Asia, we have darkness and the light, that is umnyang sasang. Had that perspective more easily, the Korean, it's a 역설 논리. It's a Korean expression, 역설, contradictory theory. Contradiction is a great source of wisdom. You know, so North and South Korea, everything else is in conflict and contradictory. But there is a great wisdom if we create a harmonious relationship between North and South Korea. Even individuals, students, think about to study, you know, and how we can compromise, say, socialism with capitalism. We can. There are a lot of scholars have done that. So instead of paying attention to making more money, selling more, this and that, which let a lot of people do that. But some scholars, especially overseas Korean young people, intelligent people, I would urge them to think about major historical contribution in creating peace in places where peace is needed throughout the world. So I don't know if that's an answer, but
Yeah, no, that was a hard answer and give us a lot of stuff to do. So thank you. I think that's all we have time for the question. I want to thank you again for answering all of our questions in detail. I personally learned so much, and there's a lot to think about as a Korean American living in America. So that concludes our program for tonight, and we want to thank everyone for joining this webinar today. We hope it was an informative and engaging discussion to learn about North Korea, South Korea, and the relationship with America, especially the 2020 election. And to Professor Park and our other guest speakers, thank you so much for taking your time to share your insights with us today. I'm sure you have learned many meaningful takeaways from today's webinar. I personally learned so much from Professor Park's lecture. And I think, you know, one of the most important things is that for all of us who can and able to, we should all go out there and exercise our power to vote. Also want to reiterate Professor Park's comment that, you know, we need to understand our roots and learn history and to really be critical about what's at stake, both in Korea and America. So if you have a moment, do you have something? If you have a moment.
Just one word, Korean Americans, especially young people, I have children myself, they should find a sense of pride for being Korean. How can they? It's very difficult to do. So education, you know, there are 8 million Koreans living abroad. I think they can be used as a national asset rather than liability for unified Korea, peaceful world. So if I've given you any food for thought, I'm very happy. Thank you.
You have, Professor Park, you have. So thank you again for your time. It was really, really fruitful. So for those of us watching us on YouTube, if you have a moment, we really appreciate if everyone could join us for a brief survey about this webinar, your experiences. The link to the survey can be found in the description box or on the YouTube chat on our YouTube channel. So thank you again, Professor Park, for your time. And thank you everyone for watching. We hope everyone stays strong, safe, and healthy during this pandemic. And we want to thank you again. Thank you so much, Professor Park.
Vote.
Vote. Everyone go vote.